We all have our own interpretations and experiences when it comes to this culture called hip-hop. Some of us were introduced to it at a very young age from a relative or a friend. Some might have first heard it on the radio. And for some, their experience and what they listen to will be influenced by their region. Regardless of who, when, and where, we all have a story to tell. I love hip-hop just like the next man, but what do you do when your love for hip-hop gets misinterpreted? This is Common versus Ice Cube and Westside Connection. Yes, two of the rappers who are most well known nowadays for their extensive acting careers and even starred in a movie together started off in a rap beef. It started off in September 1994 when Common released the song I Used to Love Her, a classic song detailing his love for hip hop. The H.E.R being an acronym for Hip Hop in its essence is real. The song was released as the first single from his second album, Resurrection, which was the last album that he would use his initial stage name, Common Sense, before it was shortened to what it is now. On the song, Common mentions hip-hop moving to the West Coast and made a reference to Boys in the Hood, the classic Eazy-E song that Ice Cube wrote, as well as the title of the first movie Ice Cube starred in. In that way, it made sense for Ice Cube, if anyone would, to respond to the song. However, like the beginning of many beefs, this was really a misunderstanding more than anything else. On Mac 10's self-titled debut studio album released in June 1995, the group Westside Connection, made up of Ice Cube, Mac 10, and WC, responded to I Used to Love Her on the song Westside Slaughterhouse by propping up the West Coast and dissing the East Coast, as well as making references to Common, such as mentioning the Chicago Bulls and a reference to H.E.R moving out west, which of course is a callback to I Used to Love Her. It's an alright track and the first song released with the three officially as a group. They would also go on to mention Common in interviews, as according to an interview Common did years later, he stated that what really pushed him to respond to the group was them mentioning him on BET, which led to the release of one of the most calm, precision strike diss tracks in rap history. In September 1996, Relativity Records released a compilation album titled Relativity Urban Assault, and on this album was the song The Bitch in You by Common, aimed at mainly Ice Cube in response to the song Westside Slaughterhouse. This wasn't something that people really expected Common to do, as he was considered a conscious rapper and not a gangster rapper or one known to get into a rap beef, especially with someone like Ice Cube, who was considered a pioneer in gangster rap and one of the most prominent West Coast hip-hop artists. On a smooth beat produced by Pete Rock, Common dismantles Ice Cube's whole persona of being a gangster rapper, yet having converted to Islam, directly calling him a hypocrite. He also mentioned that Ice Cube ran to the East Coast for his first album, once again it being hypocritical for him to even diss the East Coast, considering that the Bomb Squad produced his first album, America's Most Wanted, which is considered one of his best albums. Quite ironic. It was really a lyrical onslaught on Cube with what I really like to see on diss tracks. Facts. In the second verse, he even calls Cube H.E.R, which is a play on his real name, of course, being O'Shea, as well as sending shots towards Mac 10. Common makes plenty of references to Cube's songs, music, and videos as well, which goes to show that he really did his research on this and pays attention to hip-hop, which I really like to see. According to Pete Rock, in an interview with Complex, when asked about producing the song, Common had reached out to him upset about being dissed by Cube, and he offered his help, so Common went to New York and they recorded the track together. When speaking on this track in multiple interviews, Common said that he performed the first verse at the House of Blues in LA, and people liked it, which is what led to him writing the second verse, and then searching for a producer for the song, which eventually was Pete Rock. Ice Cube, when interviewed years later about dissing Common, said that it was a dark moment in his career, and that Common didn't deserve it, and that he was basically just tired of people dissing the West Coast. Westside Connection came back at Common on their debut studio album Bow Down, released in October 1996, on the song Hoo-Bangin, WSCG style. I assume WSCG in this song means Westside Connection Gangsta, but I'm not really sure. I didn't see any acronym associated with it that would be related to this song in some way. On the song, however, Ice Cube comes directly at Common with the line, I'm bombing on common sense. Chicago is mine, nigga, hit the fence. The rest of the artists on the song don't mention anyone in particular, and I really hate when these particular situations happen, because it really begs the question of if the rest of the artists even know or care that you're dissing someone, or if they're throwing subliminal disses in their verse also. There's been plenty of diss songs that have a feature on it, and that can bring other people into the beef as well, even unknowingly. I'm not saying that's what happened here. I'm just saying that it does happen sometimes. Regardless, it's a pretty good song. It features rappers KD, formerly from CIA, the group Cube was in before NWA, as well as All From The Eye and The Comrades, two duos who joined Mac 10's Hoo-Bangin record label. This would be the last song released in the beef, and a relatively short-lived beef overall, as it was eventually squashed in April 1997 at a time where multiple rappers had been murdered and beefs were springing up left and right, like the March 9th death of Biggie and the death of Tupac in September of 1996. Minister Farrakhan from the Nation of Islam hosted a peace summit with various rappers attending and led to Ice Cube and Common stopping the beef. Though that may have been the last of the diss tracks released regarding the beef, that was not the last altercation that occurred, however. Sometime in 1998, while in California for the filming for a Sprite commercial, Common and Mac 10 found themselves in the same place as they, along with other rappers, were a part of the commercial series. Apparently, Common and a friend of his ran into Mac 10 and his crew, and there was tension still, even though the beef between Common and Cube had been squashed. According to Common, his friend had a confrontation with Mac 10 and Mac's crew were ready for the action, but Fat Joe stepped in and calmed down the situation, telling Common that his friend had to go. However, he apparently came back and caused more problems and was then roughed up by Mac 10's crew. Common was untouched, however, and states that Fat Joe essentially saved his life that day. In a Vlad TV interview with Mac 10, he would basically corroborate this story without going into detail about what happened with Common's homie that was in the situation. Fat Joe also spoke about the event as well, pretty much saying the same thing that the other two artists did. It's kind of funny, but this wouldn't be the last time that Fat Joe was mentioned getting involved in a beef and essentially saving someone's life. I guess it makes sense that his former stage name was Fat Joe the Gangsta. As far as I know, there wasn't any other altercations between Common and Westside Connection or Ice Cube in particular, and they would even go on to collaborate about 20 years after I Used to Love Her released on the third movie in the Barbershop film series, Barbershop The Next Cut, released in 2016. If you haven't watched it, check it out. They also collaborated on a song titled Real People for the soundtrack of the film. My take on this is that it's something that once again started over a misunderstanding and almost turned into violence for the artists involved. This also was happening in the midst of the whole East Coast versus West Coast beef as well, which was a very prominent thing in the early to mid 90s. Although Common isn't from the East Coast, he is in the Midwest, and mentioning the West Coast at this time probably wasn't taken very kindly in general. Unlike some other beefs in hip-hop that have lasted for almost a decade or longer, this one was relatively short-lived, and as you can see, not many diss tracks were released either. As far as the music of the beef, I Used to Love Her isn't the diss track, but it did set the beef off, and it is still one of my favorite hip-hop songs of all time. The Bitch and You is one of my favorite diss tracks ever, and I'd say if you had to pick a winner in this beef musically, it would clearly go to Common. The way he broke down Ice Cube is reminiscent of what Ice Cube did on No Vaseline. And just like some say that NWA broke up partly because of that diss, people would say that the music released by Cube after this track didn't hold up to the quality of his first 4 albums. Up to this point, Ice Cube was seen by many as having the best diss track ever in hip-hop. And No Vaseline is one of my favorites too, and a top 10 diss track for many, including myself. But this beef here showed that Cube is definitely not infallible. Common was a new artist, just having released his second album, and Ice Cube had a more extensive career at the time, having released Straight Outta Compton with NWA and 4 solo albums at the time already. This is another beef where, once again, one of the greatest diss tracks of all time was made, and fortunately, it was able to mostly stay on wax and not branch out too far into physical violence against one another. A valuable lesson to all those out there involved in beef, and a prime example of how territorial people can be over their region, and how much hip-hop truly means to us. Overall, both of these artists went on to have great careers in both music as well as film. Ice Cube went on to produce and star in classic films like Barbershop, and Common is no slouch either with his numerous film and television series appearances, as well as joining Kanye West's Good Music record label and releasing albums such as B, which is considered a hip-hop classic by many. Now, as usual, what are your thoughts on this beef? Feel free to leave them below in the comment section, And let me know what beef you would like me to cover next. And as always, I'll catch you guys in the next video. Remember to subscribe and stay tuned for more.